Today we're going to talk about giving an IPV-2C treatment. This video is going to be broken up into a few parts. We're going to start with just your basic setup and basic operation of the knobs. Then we'll talk about some things to look at to make sure everything is set correctly as you're going through your treatment. Next, we're going to talk about things to monitor with the patient to see that they're tolerating and how to troubleshoot those things. And then we'll go in and demonstrate simulated treatments. First thing with setup is when you grab an IPV, make sure it actually has a blender attached to it. We're going to use a blender instead of just plugging it straight off the wall to oxygen source, so that we're able to match the patient's FiO2. The other parts of the setup is you're going to get these colored lines that come with the IPV and then the phasotron. And we're going to plug these in, they match your colors, red to red, clear to white, yellow to yellow, and then we'll set up our phasotron. You're going to have your nebulizer is this yellow one, it'll sort of go on the bottom, like right here. And on the back you have two ports, you have your pressure line and your phasotron line here. And you can't mess these up because of the attachments that are on there. Now this will come with a blue cap over here, over this hole. When we're doing this on a patient and we're not doing it in line, you'll pop this blue thing off, or else the pressure is going to build up real high. It has to have a place to exhale through and pressure through. We usually just pop some corrugated tubing on that. So now you're all set up and ready to go. Quick overview of the knobs. Over here you have the operational pressure, this black knob. You're going to use this pressure gauge right here. It's going to tell you the PSI that we set with the operational pressure. This is essentially just going to control how much flow comes to the machine. So the higher the PSI, the more flow is available. And the lower the PSI, the less flow is available. Typically, we're just going to set this to 40, the PSI, and that's going to give us enough flow. We're going to do that specifically if you're in the pediatric side. In neonatal, we're actually going to start out on 20, and then you can adjust your operational pressure and add more PSI if you need more flow. And again, we'll talk about that in the next part of the video of how to notice those things. So that's your operational pressure. This knob is your inspiratory flow knob. This is how much of that flow that's coming to the machine from the operational pressure that is going to go to the patient. And so this is going to be one of our big knobs we use to adjust based on our chest wiggle and our pressure bar. Then we have our demand CPAP. This is just going to add extra flow to the circuit. It's going to help you maintain your max as you're going through your treatment. Your inspiratory time knob is going to control the IDE ratio for your percussive breaths. We're just always going to keep this arrow pointed up at 12 o'clock. That's going to give us a 1-to-1 ratio. Then we have our frequency knob. So our frequency knob, or our percussion knob, is going to control how fast or slow breaths are delivered. And it's going to react a little bit different physiologically when you do this. So the slower the percussive rates, the bigger volumes you're going to get. So with bigger volumes moving, you're going to lower the CO2, so you're going to blow off more CO2. Because you're moving more volume, you're going to move more secretions, but you're going to have less trapped PEEP. So there's a chance your SATs could go down a little bit. You may de-recruit a little bit in the side. Whereas with the higher percussion rates, you're going to have smaller volumes. So you're going to have a higher CO2. You'll still have secretion movement, but because you're moving less volume, there's not going to be quite as much. And with the higher percussion rates, you're going to have an increased trap PEEP and SATs. You're going to increase your lung recruitment. You're going to build up your FRC, especially once you move some secretions around. Then we have our on-off switch, which turns it on and off. And we have a neb on-off switch, which we're going to keep on. And then down here, you have your manual inspiration. We're not going to use this, it's risky. You're going to just open total flow to the patient for as long as you depress this button. As long as you press it down, it's just maximum flow. So that can lead to some high pressure and flow delivery to the patient and cause some lung injury. There are three things that you need to pay attention to as you're going through a treatment to make sure that your settings are correct, to make sure your knobs are in the right spot. And the first is chest wiggle in your patient. So you should have chest wiggle going down to about the hips. That's kind of your goal with it, right? And then the other two things you're going to look at are on this pressure manometer. So it's not on right now, but when we turn it on, you'll see it. You're going to look at two main components of it. You're going to have your mean airway pressure right here, and then you have this little pressure bar that's going up and down. So every time you make an adjustment on here, from the time you start the treatment and put the patient on to going through the treatment, every increment, everything that you do, you're going to be making adjustments to keep your chest wiggle how you want it, to keep your mean airway pressure matching whatever your patient was on if they're on a ventilator, and then looking at this pressure bar and making sure we stay in this green area. If you need to make adjustments for chest wiggle and for this pressure bar, you're going to use your inspiratory flow knob and potentially your operational pressure if you need more or less flow. To help maintain your mean airway pressure where you want it, after you get your chest wiggle and your pressure bar where you want it, you're going to use your demand CPAP. There's really four main things that you're trying to monitor during the treatment to see if your patient is tolerating the treatment. The first is your SATs, right? So with this IPV treatment, we can cause some de-recruitment if we're not matching our maps, or if we're doing a bunch of suctioning, or even if you just go to the slow side of the frequency knob, your map's going to decrease a little bit more because you're not retaining as much. And so you can decrease your SATs a little bit, especially since we're matching our FiO2 on the blender, and that's why we do it, because we want to see, we don't want to mask it with 100%, so that's why we use the blender. But if they start to desat, you can do a few things. You can go up on your FiO2. You could go to the fast mode of the frequency so that you start to build up more FRC and re-recruit, as long as their SATs haven't dropped down too far by that time. And then if your kid drops to like 40 or something, just take them off and battle. The other things you're looking at are blood pressure. So because we're adding a bunch of intrathoracic pressure to the chest cavity, we can decrease venous return, and that can cause blood pressure to drop. So if we're doing that, we need to try to decrease our mean airway pressures a little bit and see if that helps. We can also cause the CVP to go up, again because of intrathoracic pressure. This can increase your pulmonary vascular resistance, and that can lead to an increase in CVP. And you're going to see that mainly when you're on the fast mode, again because you're building up more FRC and building up more mean on that side. And the other thing that you're looking at is CO2. So because we can blow off a lot of CO2, we have to have some kind of monitoring system to look at it. So the easiest one is the NIRS. That'll tell us if we're blowing off too much CO2. We call it cerebrovasoconstriction. And so you get less blood flow to the head, and then your brain SATs drop, and you can see that with the NIRS. You can also see that with just level of consciousness. So if your patient is awake and with it, and then you give them the treatment, and they're in the middle of it, they are woozy, you might be blowing off too much CO2. The other thing that blowing off too much CO2 is going to do is knock out your respiratory drive. So if your CO2 is 10, your brain is not going to tell you that you need to breathe at all because your CO2 is 10, and they don't want to make it go any lower. If you have a kid who's spontaneously breathing, and then you're giving them a treatment and they stop spontaneously breathing, that's another sign that you've blown off too much CO2. If we don't have a NIRS and our kid is sedated and paralyzed potentially, you're not going to be able to see any of those things. So the other option is to use a TCOM. You can put that on before you start, let it level out and get a baseline, And then when you start your treatment, if it starts to drop too much, then you can make those adjustments. And how you can troubleshoot that again is you can go, if typically it's going to happen when you're going slower. So if it starts to happen, then you can move back to the fast side, let them build up a little bit. They're going to retain a little bit more CO2 on the fast side. And so then that should help. Now we're going to simulate treatment real quick and walk through one, how you should give it. First things first, you're going to use normal saline, or you can use 3% if they order that. You're going to put 15 to 20 mLs in the neb cup and then pop it in there. Your minimum treatment time is going to be 15 minutes. That doesn't mean it has to be just 15 minutes. If you have a kid and you're getting a bunch of secretions, you can go a little bit longer. If you have a kid who you notice when you put them back on the vent, the treatment before, that their sats dropped a little bit, you can leave a little bit more time to re-recruit, but you need to be at least 15 minutes to get a good treatment. You're going to give all your other nebulizers, like your albuterol and everything like that, in the aerogen or the small nebs before you actually start IPV. When we're going to do one, we are going to start it before we actually put it on the patient, and we're going to get everything set correctly. So for this, I'm going to turn this flow up. I'm going to turn this demand CPAP off. I'm going to turn it on. I'm going to block the end, make sure I'm going to put this up to 40. I'm going to start looking over here on this side. Can't really see it, you can kind of see it. The numbers and the pressure bar. Sorry for the glare. So right now it's saying we have a mean airway pressure of 23. We're probably not going to want that high. So we can turn down our inspiratory flow a little bit. Go down. And also our pressure bar was up pretty high. And let's say our mean was 15. So that's where I'm going to start it at right now. And then we're going to put it on the patient. And we're going to look for those three things that we talked about earlier. We're going to look for chest wiggle, we're going to make sure our mean is good, and we're going to make sure our pressure bar is good. But right now, I have this blocked against my hand, so the pressure is going to build up easier. When I put it on the patient, I'm going to have to adjust my knobs a little bit. So we're just going to use test one because I don't have a patient. Once I put it on here, I'm looking at the wiggle with here, and I'm looking back here. See our pressure dropped. We're going to turn our inspiratory flow up. We're looking right here. We're still not getting there. My inspiratory flow is maxed out. We're at 13 when we get to 14. So I'm going to add a little bit of demand CPAP until we jump up to 14. Because my pressure bar is still good. Okay, so now we're going to start the treatment. You get them here. They got good chest wiggle down to their hips. Their bar is still in the green. You're at 14. Now we're good. So we're going to sit here for a couple minutes. You hear a bunch of jump, you suction it out. After a couple minutes, we're going to make it go slower. And typically it's going to be about a quarter of a turn before you hear anything like significant as far as rate change. So you go to something like this. After that turn, now I'll go back to my three things. Chest wiggle and pressure bar first. We're getting a little high. We're up here. I know it's hard to see on the video, but we're up here in this yellow now. So I want to turn my inspiratory flow knob down so I'm not as much flow is going to the patient. So now I'm wiggling a lot more than I should. I'm hitting higher pressures, and I don't want to be up here because that could cause some trauma that way. So I'm going to turn my flow down a little bit, get myself back into the green, which we are now. My mean is good. So now I'm going to sit here again, sit here for a couple minutes. If I hear anything, we're going to suction. And we're going to go make it a little bit slower. Look at our chest wiggle. Look at our pressure, which is now way up here. So we're going to have to turn that down. As we turn this down, now our mean is going to drop a little bit. We're right where we want to be pressure bar, but now we're going to have to add some more demand CPAP to make sure our map is where we are so we don't de-recruit. You get that set. Sit here for a second, couple minutes. Suction. Slow it down a little bit more. With the chest wiggle. Pressure bar, again, we're a little high. So we're going to lower this a little bit more, but because we do that, we're going to have to increase our demand CPAP. Get back up to where we want to be. And we're going to leave it here for a couple minutes. Suction. And every time you do this and you're sitting here for a couple of minutes, this is when you're monitoring your patient's status to see if they're tolerating. Again, looking at their SATs, their blood pressure, CVP, CO2. You stay here for a couple minutes, then you're going to start going back to the fast mode. Now, when you go from the slowest mode and start moving back fast with the flows and the demand CPAP you have, you're going to start to build up that mean really quick, so your mean's going to probably jump up pretty quick on the first turn. You have to turn that demand CPAP back down pretty quick. We're going to do this. Jumped up by a couple, so we're still good with our pressure bar and our chest wiggle, but we're a little high on our demand CPAP, so we're going to turn that down. Adjust it down to where we get back to where we want at 14. Leave it here for a couple minutes. Suction. Watch the patient. Make another turn. Go back. Now my chest wiggle isn't quite as good on here. My pressure bar is only about halfway. So I'm going to increase my flow now to get a little bit more wiggle and get my bar up a little bit more. And if I do that, now I'm adding more flow, so more mean. So I can take away some more of that demand CPAP because I don't need it now. Leave here for a couple minutes. Go back to the fastest mode. Again, chest wiggle, pressure bar. It dropped a little bit more. So I'm going to add a little bit more flow. And now I'm on the fastest mode, and what I'm going to do is just leave it here now. And I'm going to let them re-recruit. Let them build up their FRC, and we're going to sit here for 3-4 minutes. Once that time is up, you turn the ventilator back on, top them off, connect them back to the ventilator, and then turn off the machine. Once you're finished, you have your patient back on their vent, and they're stabilized and everything, you're going to take your phasotron and stuff and clean it. And so to clean it, you're just going to take it apart, essentially. You're going to take that part off, pop the neck cup out. You're going to take this little piece right here and turn it, and then out comes the spring phasotron parts. We're going to rinse all this stuff with sterile water, and then you're going to put it in the designated drying area for wherever you're working at.